The Crime Pays Initiative. We must do something. This is the something that must be done. Law enforcement. The current focus of law enforcement is for officers to arrest people with the goal of taking them to jail. Why? How did enforcing laws become exclusively about incarcerating people? Commendations and promotions are often based on how many people an officer is arrested and successfully prosecuted. Again, the focus isn't on enforcing laws, but on punishing lawbreakers. If it worked, that'd be fine. But it doesn't. How much of an officer's time is spent on the paperwork and the process to punish one lawbreaker while other laws are being broken by countless individuals? Law enforcement officers are vastly outnumbered, receive a low salary, are exposed to constant dangers, are treated with open disrespect, contempt, and hatred, and lack the support of local and national leaders. It's a wonder anyone wants to enter law enforcement. How about the lawbreaker? When someone gets arrested, whether they did the crime or not, they know they must hire an attorney to defend them or to negotiate a plea deal to make the experience as cheap and painless as possible. Attorneys love that since they're making plenty of money off it. But it's all a racket. The district attorneys in charge of prosecuting know they'll be lenient and allow the defense attorneys to make deals and plead down the charges. Why continue the corruption? Our system has been built by lawyers for lawyers. We need a way to cut out the prosecutors and defense attorneys and judges who make out like fat cats while the people doing all the work and risking their lives barely get by. We must separate the enforcing of laws from the prosecution of offenders. Law enforcement officers are currently forced to think and act like attorneys as they pick through evidence using chain of custody procedures, knowing some savvy, high-priced lawyer is going to get a DA or judge to toss out the evidence anyway. Shouldn't that be the job of lab technicians? Or forensics specialists? The officer's work should be focused on apprehending the perpetrators, not on building a case for the district attorney. They should take them to jail, if so ordered, or simply collect their ID, fingerprints, and DNA and send them on their way so the officers are free to arrest other lawbreakers. How have our law enforcement officers kept up their morale with their success being tied to prosecuting people and sending them to prison, something they have no control over? Who would want that job? We've all heard the clarion cries across the airwaves about reimagining policing and reforming our judicial system. There are many who want to get rid of prisons altogether. Is that possible? What would that look like? Is there a way of enforcing laws and maintaining a peaceful and safe society that wouldn't be so focused on incarcerating people? Currently, lawbreakers assume they'll get away with it. That, even if they get arrested, an activist district attorney won't prosecute them and instead simply turn them loose. Some cities require the offense to be of a certain dollar amount before they prosecute. Officers don't even bother responding when called for a simple car break-in or mugging. Arresting people who won't suffer any penalties for their aberrant behavior is only pointless and dispiriting for the officers, but dangerous. Just as we've seen with domestic abusers and career criminals, when bad behavior is unchecked, it gets worse. Mayor Rudy Giuliani successfully controlled crime in New York City using something called the broken windows theory. He posited that if police stopped petty crimes like public urination, jumping turnstiles, and breaking windows, they'd stop the assaults and robberies, since those same people who ignored the small laws eventually ignored the big ones too. His theory worked brilliantly. Let's build on that. Justice delayed is justice denied. Our current system allows lawbreakers time to pay fines, arrange for defense, and pay court costs. If someone is arrested for drunk driving, there's typically no immediate cash outlay to be freed from jail. Other than the inconvenience of spending a few hours behind bars, they aren't negatively impacted for their actions. But human nature shows us that when actions immediately affect someone financially, people reconsider those actions. We must change our method of law enforcement to coincide with what we know. Doing the same thing over and over will yield the same results: anarchy and lawlessness. We need more laws? Lawmakers feel like they're doing their job, passing more laws. There's never any thought about enforcement, just more laws. We must do something is the rallying cry, without a thought of whether it will solve anything. We push more and more of society's problems onto our law enforcement while appreciating them less and less. Law enforcement officers are the first, last, and often only line of defense, interdiction, outreach, and counseling, all the things every other aspect of society has failed to do. Lawmakers and civil attorneys continue putting more and more requirements on them, now opening them up to personal lawsuits. Why have laws if they aren't enforced? Why pass more laws when we can't or won't enforce the laws we have? Stand down. Now we have mayors ordering police to stand down while property is destroyed and citizens are threatened, beaten, and killed. District attorneys refuse to prosecute hardened criminals known to be guilty. New York City and other jurisdictions release felons without even requiring bail. Passing more laws doesn't seem to be the solution. How many ways can we say it's wrong to harm another, to steal from another, to murder another? How many laws do we need to get people to understand their rights end where another's rights begin? Laws are supposed to protect life, liberty, and property. We are currently doing none of those. Only the best that we can afford. Law enforcement work is similar to other physically demanding professions in that we need young, fit people out in the field who can get hurt doing their jobs. We need to give them pay commensurate with the hazards they endure and the limited time they can practice, just like high-level athletes receive in the NBA, the NFL, or the UFC. Instead, we pay the least to rookie officers, the ones most at risk, then wonder why more people aren't applying. After all, what's not to like? You get ridiculed, shot at, spit on, things thrown at you, and then you're denigrated by politicians, who are the first to call if they are threatened, all for barely enough money to survive. We will forever remain behind the criminal element unless we do one simple thing: monetize criminal activities and bad behavior while protecting law enforcement officers from legal consequences while doing their job. What's our goal? If the goal is preventing people from breaking laws, then we must gear our efforts toward that end. People don't walk into a 5-star restaurant expecting to find a $5 burger on the menu. They don't walk into Saks Fifth Avenue expecting to find a $10 shirt. We're now even attempting to require hospitals, clinics, and labs to publish the prices of procedures so we'll know in advance how much it's going to cost us. We always check price tags before allowing ourselves or our kids to want something. Expense is a limiting factor for people. That's human nature. Why don't we apply that basic fact of life to law enforcement? If people knew their bad behavior and lawlessness would cost them money today, they'd think twice about what they're doing. We must impose an arrest fee for all felonies and misdemeanors. If we assign a standard $200 arrest fee for the breaking of any law, then whoever breaks the law, regardless of whether they are ever prosecuted, must pay that fee to be released. It's an arrest fee, not a fine, a simple charge for a service. It requires lawbreakers to pay for the service of being arrested by law enforcement. Once a law is broken, that act invokes a fee. The arrest, whether immediate or days later, is when the fee must be paid. Video evidence of the arrest, the offense, and/or witness statements, for example, theft, the perpetrator with the property, video of accusation, is evidence enough for the assessing of the fee, which is due immediately and is non-refundable. For example, stealing a shirt from Walmart costs $200 when they come to arrest you, and they will come. Add a pair of shoes, $400. If Walmart then wants to prosecute, that's up to them. The prosecution of a crime has nothing to do with enforcing the law or laws broken, and therefore nothing to do with the arrest fee. Lawbreakers must pay for the service of being arrested. How is it different? If you order a pizza, you're expected to pay for it when it arrives because you invoke the cost by ordering it. When you take your family out to dinner and order food and drinks, you must pay for it, with a healthy tip included. If you spend the weekend at a casino, ordering room service and hitting the minibar, come Sunday night, you must pay for your lavish lifestyle or be arrested and sued. Actions are followed by consequences. As enlightened, intelligent beings, humans can reasonably be expected to understand that. When you break a law, you should be expected to pay for the service of the enforcement of that law, your arrest, because you initiated it. Motor vehicle violations, parking, simple speeding, rolling through a stop sign, etc., shouldn't be included. Once people get stopped for going 2 miles per hour over the speed limit, public support will end. The Crime Pays initiative should invoke a feeling of safety and of protecting our families, our communities, and even our civilization. It shouldn't feel like Big Brother is watching your every move, but providing a protective overwatch for society's well-being. Be nice. Special handling fees also apply. Once an officer says, "I'm restraining you," or "I'm placing you under arrest," anything other than putting your hands behind your back and standing still is resisting arrest. Each act of resistance should require a $1,000 fee because the arrest has become more dangerous for the officer and the public. Running from an officer on foot is an additional $1,000. Illegally crossing a street or someone's property during the fleeing carries additional fees since an even more dangerous situation is being created. Fleeing in a car should be an additional $5,000 fee with each run stoplight, act of speeding, destruction of property, and endangerment of others carrying its own additional fee. Car chases can easily cost tens of thousands of dollars. Assaulting an officer assesses a $500 fee per occurrence. If an officer is spit on once, cursed twice, and has something thrown toward her, that's an additional $2,000 since the arrest now requires special handling. Pushing or striking an officer must be an additional $5,000 to $100,000 each, depending on the harm done. We must not allow the abuse or battering of our law enforcement officers. Anything other than showing respect for our law enforcement must not be tolerated. The famous footage of Shia LaBeouf being arrested for public intoxication and resisting arrest while constantly berating, cursing, and threatening officers, only to have him released with no charges filed, could never happen under the Crime Pays initiative. That stunt would have cost the actor well over $100,000. That's a deterrent. That's justice. But what if they have a mental illness? What if they do? If someone's a threat to themselves, the public, or our officers, they need to be off the streets. Relatives need to take control of their situation. Someone must take responsibility. If there truly is no one, we must have a social worker assigned to help the person apply for financial assistance so their fee can be satisfied. That can be the push for help that the person needs, else we simply don't care about them. We spend extreme amounts of money to care for people who need it, but who are too unwell to know they need it. Making someone financially responsible for the arrest fees accrued by their sick relative who they know needs help will make them more proactive in that person's treatment and recovery. We must get a handle on these societal problems. We can't keep dumping them onto law enforcement. An arrest fee will do just that. The fund. Where does all the money go? All proceeds are collected by a nonprofit entity established for that purpose, with half the money paid to the arresting officers, half remaining in the law enforcement fund. An existing entity, such as the Fraternal Order of Police, or a newly established one, can be used to collect fees for every arrest made. Officers get paid immediately when the offender pays the fee. The money collected in the law enforcement fund is then spent on officer support, such as for fallen or wounded officers and their families, better gear, armor, tech, weapons, body cams, installing CCTV cameras, and purchasing drones for surveillance of lawbreakers. No government. It is vital to the success of this program that no government entity be allowed anywhere near the money. That would breed immediate corruption. Once a politician or government agency controls the fund, it would cause a police state to exist within that community. The money would also disappear quickly. Take DNA. We also need to have officers collect fingerprints and DNA from all special handling lawbreakers. The fund could be used to run mobile labs that would quickly collect the necessary biometrics. We then create a database managed by the fund in each jurisdiction that allows searches by other jurisdictions. That database must also be protected from corporate or government intrusion and interference. The DNA collected is only to be used by and for law enforcement, not government, not insurance companies, not big tech. Nice community patrol. Law enforcement officers won't have any reason to be mean or use excessive force on criminals, since they'll be their bread and butter. Officers get frustrated, and who wouldn't, when they are assaulted by criminals, go through all the motions of arresting someone, then get the case dismissed by some corrupt district attorney. Since the arrest fees assess automatically and independent of whether charges are filed, officers get paid for doing their job. That will boost morale. It'll also teach the street thugs that unless they want to spend a lot of money, they better start being nice in public, and especially to our officers. A simple $200 fee increased by hundreds or thousands of dollars because of bad behavior will quickly teach lawbreakers to be respectful and to stop their antisocial activities. An officer's request to talk to someone that turns into a $1,000 foot chase will teach them to stop that nonsense. Isn't that the purpose of laws? Aren't we trying to get people to stop breaking them, along with stopping all the other aberrant behavior? Aren't we just trying to get people to be decent and orderly? Law enforcement agencies know where the criminals are, but currently wait until they commit a significant crime so they can be properly prosecuted. With the Crime Pays initiative, officers will arrest every single lawbreaker every time, making money off each offense. Areas that have illicit drug problems can assign a fee of $1,000 or more for each microgram of a substance. Drug dealers will quickly go broke when each is arrested multiple times each day. With the disrespectful attitude prevalent, each arrest will carry special handling fees as they assault and abuse the officers. Our Constitution provides for peaceable assemblies. The Supreme Court has altered that to include protests in the addressing of grievances. But those aren't government buildings that are being torched, looted, and destroyed. Those businesses are owned by the people of those communities. They're being destroyed by paid rioters. That's not protected. The protesters that break laws by blocking traffic or blocking access to businesses must be arrested en masse, along with all those breaking the noise restrictions with bullhorns. That's disturbing the peace. If we stop the small things, the big things won't have a chance to happen. That makes everyone safer, including the law-abiding protesters. Can you imagine how much safer the streets and stores will be with hundreds of law enforcement officers happily working for commission only? This is the way to show our love and appreciation for our officers while gaining a more civil society. You want police walking a beat? On bicycles? On segways? We'll have every conceivable mode of officer in streets, in nightclubs, in strip malls, even in Walmart. Requiring people to act responsibly and respectfully while in public is the only way to take back our streets and communities. Keep your money. The arrest fee could allow law enforcement officers to work for commission only, allowing the hiring of far more officers. The fee is unavoidable, with any arrest being unaffected by plea deals or non-prosecution by attorneys general. Every community could immediately implement this and quickly end crimes and foster a more civil society. Anyone who wants effective community policing should support this. Requiring people to act responsibly and respectfully while in public is the only way to take back our streets and communities. People already know that arrests can be expensive. With the implementation of the Crime Pays Initiative, law enforcement officers will be making all the money instead of lawyers. When corrupt DAs refuse to prosecute, who cares? The officer's success and pay aren't based on prosecution, but on enforcing the law. If a municipality wants to pay the arrest fees for those who can't afford it, they're welcome to. Any citizen, entity, or corporation can pay the arrest fees. That won't damage law enforcement, but promote it. More money collected means more police hired, and means the fund grows larger. The greater the fund grows, the more surveillance and protection grows. No mercy. Every negative interaction with law enforcement officers must require a fee. A simple stop and talk can be only that, neighborhood relations. But if a law has been broken, a fee must be collected. That will cause everyone involved to take every interaction more seriously, both the perpetrators and the officers. Letting people off causes a lackadaisical attitude from both officers and offenders. That maybe you'll get charged a fee, maybe you won't attitude is dangerous and will allow officers to be prejudiced in their enforcement. If all white female offenders get away with littering while Asian men are always required to pay the fee, then we have racism and possibly sexism. We must remove any judgment and simply have every officer enforce every law. That'll generate the money needed to pay the officers properly and increase the fund quickly for better equipment and better enforcement techniques. It may be necessary to require any officer who doesn't collect an arrest fee to pay the fund part himself. Weakness or non-compliance from one officer threatens them all and reintroduces the potential for racism and sexism, as well as an appearance of weakness or fecklessness within the system. Some examples. Porch pirates. One of the things plaguing many communities today is porch pirates, people who steal packages that are delivered while the owners are at work. Cute name, but we must draw a hard line at this kind of theft. A $1,000 arrest fee, half given to people who give information leading to the arrest, would send a clear message that we, as a society, won't put up with that kind of foolishness. $500 is enough money for people to turn their friends in, or enough of an incentive to watch out for their neighbors. The tipsters get paid. The officers get paid. The fund gets paid. Everyone wins, except the criminal. Whether they're prosecuted or not doesn't matter. It's already cost them $1,000 and their privacy, far more if they try to escape justice by running or evading. Riots become cash cows. Can you imagine how much law enforcement officers could make from one Antifa riot? Protests are fine, but once streets or stores are blocked, property is damaged, or people are harmed or threatened, they've broken the law. Corralling several hundred people for hours until we can obtain an arrest fee from each person for blocking a public street or business will net a lot of money, regardless of whether anyone ever gets prosecuted. Make some noise! These rioters going through neighborhoods with air horns, bullhorns, speakers, and tactical lights are disturbing the peace and violating noise ordinances. Charging them $200 each will end those acts of domestic terrorism while protecting citizens and property. Corrupt billionaires. We seem to have a slew of evil billionaires who were willing to pay for anarchy by contributing to the campaigns of corrupted attorneys general and mayors. They also like to pay for rioters to generate chaos among protesters and work them up into a frenzy of violence and property damage. They're more than welcome to pay the arrest fees for the anarchists over and over again. Our officers need more money, even the money of the very wealthy, the very powerful, and the very evil. With the Crime Pays initiative, instead of corrupt mayors and DAs picking and choosing what laws to enforce, we'll have police and deputies enforcing all the laws. Then the city councils and legislatures can do their job and get rid of laws people don't want and pass laws people do want. Once we separate law enforcement from the judiciary, which has become corrupt in many areas, we'll begin to have true law enforcement that is independent of the corruption. Still on the books. There are laws against spitting in many areas. If you've ever lived in a city with concrete everywhere, you'll understand why when you see the stains, gum, and cigarette butts on sidewalks, parking lots, and streets. Disgusting. There are laws concerning leaving your trash can out on the street too long. If a municipality doesn't want it enforced, they can take it off the books. It makes no sense to have laws that are never enforced. This attitude of, well, it's not enforced, will change when an officer can feed her family by enforcing those unenforced laws. Foul language is forbidden in most municipalities. Officers will become experts on what laws are on the books when their pay is based on it. The streets will either look like an idyllic scene from a 1950s movie, or officers will be driving around in luxury cars. Smoke out. In many states, it's against the law to smoke in any building or within 20 feet of any entrance. Smoking is expressly forbidden in all restrooms. But there's never enforcement of that law because it's not actionable. You can't call 911 and tell them someone's breaking the law by smoking a cigarette near an entrance. We can't even enforce the law of no smoking within 20 feet of a gasoline pump. Why create a law that can't or won't be enforced? If we impose a fee of $50 per occurrence, we can force smokers away from gas pumps and buildings and entrances while protecting ourselves and our kids from the dangers of secondhand smoke. We already have cameras everywhere to see the offenders. Law enforcement officers simply watch the video while recording it to their own device, then arrest the offenders, requiring the payment of the arrest fee. Littering. Littering is also expressly forbidden, yet rampant. It should include wrappers, cigarette butts, cups, bottles, newspapers, everything. A $100 or $200 arrest fee per item per occurrence will end that quickly. The fund could even create a simple phone app allowing citizens to turn people in for all these societal nuisances and offer a small reward each time they do. Maybe that sounds a little over the top, but people are no longer polite, law-abiding citizens. They don't seem to care that they walk around in filth every day. Do you? Cell phone zombies. Whether using cell phones is expressly forbidden or not, distracted driving is against the law. People sit through green traffic lights, drive through stop signs, drive 20 miles per hour under the limit, swerve around like they're drunk. A $200 fee will force people to pay more attention to the road rather than to their phones. The public can be encouraged to install dash cams in their cars by offering a $50 finder's fee for emailing footage of offenders. Drugs. Each community should control whether they allow marijuana or other illicit substances to be carried on their streets. Canine cops can easily be used to patrol the streets and detect the drugs. It's still illegal in most communities to carry any amount of marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, or many other drugs. The problem is attorneys general won't prosecute. That will no longer matter when officers focus on enforcing laws rather than imprisoning people. If not locally, it's still against federal law to carry any amount of certain drugs, even marijuana. Local law enforcement can, and do, enforce federal, state, and local laws. The only reason for a municipality to not enforce a law is because they don't have the resources. With their Crime Pays initiative, enforcing all laws pays. A law is a law until the governing body changes it. Enforcing laws through an arrest fee allows communities to take control of their streets. Finally, crime pays. The good guys.